how do you truly start to belong to a place and to really call that home? And I think we're not going to fight for the places that we don't love, and it's very hard to love a place that you don't know.
That was David Pocock, and you're listening to The Regenerative Journey. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and internationally, and their continuing connection to country, culture, community, land, sea and sky. And we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.
G'day, I'm your host Charlie Arnott, an 8th generational Australian regenerative farmer. And in this podcast series, I'll be diving deep and exploring my guests' unique perspectives on the world so you can apply their experience and knowledge to cultivate your own transition to a more regenerative way of life.
Welcome to The Regenerative Journey with your host Charlie Arnott.
G'day, very excited to have interviewed David Pocock for the next episode of The Regenerative Journey. Most of our listeners would probably know David as being one of Wallaby captains, a rugby union captain, one of the probably in his heyday, one of the best rugby union players in the world. And what a lovely bloke. He's been here for a couple of days doing the Introduction to Biodynamics workshop at Hannah, and I caught up with David talking, looking over the dam here at Hannah and a beautiful landscape in front of us. We talked about his life growing up in Zimbabwe, moving to Australia, playing rugby, not too much rugby, mainly about regenerative agriculture, his advocacy work there, his interests with some amazing community projects back in Zimbabwe, his time there spent on a farm a couple of years ago and his learnings of that. A book he's published with his with Emma, his partner, in Our Nature, and a whole lot of other cool stuff: nutrition, health, mental health. A really good yarn with David, and a lovely bloke. And as I said in the interview, really glad that he's part of life here in Australia, not just as a legend rugby union player, but as one of the team advocating for regenerative ag practices and the principles. And just before we head into the interview, I just want to tell you about our upcoming Victorian Introduction to Biodynamics workshops. They're 2 days. The first one is on the 18th and 19th of March. It's not very far away in the Macedon Ranges, just an hour or so out of Melbourne. And on the 22nd and 23rd, a couple of days later, we'll be in East Gippsland at a 2,000-acre cattle farm there at Woodcott Farm. It's 2 days, theory in the morning, practice in the afternoon. Go to charliearnott.com.au for all the booking details, and I hope to see you there. David Pocock, welcome to my mum and dad's loft house accommodation here at Hannah.
Thanks for having me, Charlie. It's such a beautiful view. Great to see a bit of the farm.
It's a view I don't actually get to see very much because I'm usually up here. I won't say I'm tidying for mum and dad, but I'm certainly making sure that there's no rats and mice and stuff going on. So I glimpse out this beautiful, for those who can't, actually no one can see, we're the only ones who can see, even the guys watching the video, you're just getting the back wall of the loft. We're looking over a dam, a lake, I guess. We call it a dam. It's always been a dam to us. Beside the house, the homestead here at Hannah, looking south at mainly... there's a few ornamental trees in the garden, beautiful willow hanging over the dam. And then beyond that, there's canola, not ours. And there's been a fair bit of, on our neighbours, a fair bit of revegetation. Some of the earliest, see that big strip through there, Dave, that's quite thick just below the canola?
Yep.
That was the first direct seeded project in Burrawa. So going back, I think it's the late 80s, maybe 1991. So in 89, the Burrawa Community Land Care Group was established. I think it was the second in Australia, and I think that that was the first one. It's pretty thick. They went hard. They went right. Let's do this. So that's kind of cool. I often look at that and go, well, that was a significant moment in the history of the environment at Burrawa. Plenty of other ones that weren't so good. Dave, as the name of the podcast suggests, we're looking and talking about regenerative journeys. I'm really keen to sort of drill into yours. So where do you want to start?
Well, maybe from the start.
Let's do it.
I'll give you a little bit of my background. I grew up on a farm in the middle of Zimbabwe, and very conventional farming.
Conventional in what sense?
Kind of high input, aiming for high output. It didn't always happen with, drought and all the rest that came. But we ran a few sheep and some cattle, but that really wasn't the focus. We were mainly doing maize, tomatoes, and then fresh cut flowers for export. So pretty intensive. We had, I think, 3 hectares of hypericum under lights to kind of extend the days and make them flower at the right time of year.
Are they native to Zimbabwe? I'm not familiar with them.
No, they're not. It's kind of the St. John's wort, that kind of red berry-looking thing. You'd know it if you saw it.
Sure.
In flower arrangements. So we did them, and then Buplurum, which was just a filler, and they were all exported to Holland.
Wow.
So
Fresh.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess growing up in Zimbabwe, Alan Savory was a well-known name and very controversial.
I want to get back to that.
As well as, guys like Johann Zietsman who were really challenging paradigms. Farming there, like I think a lot of places in the world, is very conservative kind of mindset, knowledge passed down through generations and accumulated over a long period of time, and to when you have guys like Alan and Johann challenging that, it often didn't go down too well. So I kind of, probably wasn't until after I left school. I'd grown up loving nature, loving wildlife, and kind of, if I didn't get into rugby, my thing was wanting to be a game ranger, like a park ranger. And I guess as I started to do a bit more reading, was interested in ecology, and then kind of got onto human ecology. Like, how do we think of our place in the world? How do we interact with the environment we live in? How do we construct, the built environments? And that really brought me back to agriculture and starting to read a bit more widely. Read some of Alan Savory's stuff. I guess there's a bunch of good stuff out there, and really started to see what a amazing role agriculture can actually play and has to play in changing our relationship to the places that we live. If we're to actually pass on an exciting future to future generations.
And do you think growing up on a farm and having the interest of not just agriculture, well, I guess your interest in agriculture, well, I'll start again. Was your interest in agriculture, do you think, and sort of turning into a regenerative approach because you grew up on a farm, or do you think that might have been, like if you'd grown up in the city somewhere, do you think you would have stepped into this space as much as you have?
I'm not sure. Initial reaction is probably not. Both sides of my family were farming. My mum's side of the family were citrus farmers down in the Lowveld, and my dad's side of the family were farming in South Africa, and then also in Zimbabwe in the Midlands. I think that was something that kind of brought me back to it. I remember as a young kid kind of almost promising myself that I wouldn't go into farming just because of how precarious it was financially, and seeing, just the weekly struggle to pay wages and balance the books and try and squeeze out a bit of a profit. So yeah, as a kid, it wasn't something that I wanted to do, but I guess I've become more and more interested in it, and really interested in the conversation that's starting to happen more and more in Australia around a different perspective on farming, a different way of thinking about farming, and starting to develop systems that are working with nature rather than a very kind of colonial European view of beating the land into submission and
mastering nature.
Yeah.
Were your memories fond? And I'm asking that question because, given your previous and current sort of involvement over there, which we'll get to, was it, apart from, I guess, not wanting to be a farmer, did you have fond memories of farming, growing up on a farm?
Loved it. I mean, I'm so grateful for the upbringing I had. We had quite a bit of wildlife on our farm. So as a kid, I'd be, off with the single shot shotgun, just kind of roaming the place. Yeah, and I think that really
shooting vermin, I'm sure.
Yeah, trying to shoot a dove or a franklin or guinea fowl or something to try and come back and cook up for afternoon tea.
What's a franklin?
It's kind of like they call them spur fowl now. They're kind of smaller than a guinea fowl, and brown
bird. Yeah,
yeah. Probably it's like a really big quail.
Really, yeah.
And
what was tell us, just to sort of set the scene, I mean, what's the duration? How long had Europeans been farming in Zimbabwe?
I think only since the early 1900s.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But they'd been, obviously the Europeans had been there for some time. Had they not sort of been, was it more sort of cattle rearing and that sort of thing? Or was it really a frontier territory?
Yeah, it was. I think Cecil John Rhodes moved up into Zimbabwe with the the British South Africa Company. I think in the 1860s. Don't quote me on that, but I think around then.
Yeah.
And then I guess from there they kind of took over and really did some dodgy deals and cheated I think initially the Ndebele out of a bunch of land and then kind of kept moving north.
Mm. One of my favourite author as a child was Wilbur Smith.
Okay.
And I read every book.
Yeah, right.
And I was Sean Courtney, doing all that cool stuff. Your reference to being a game hunter, that's what I wanted to be. I could see myself in my gear and my rifle and my leather and all that sort of stuff. It was just an absolute dream, and I've never been.
We'll have to get you over there.
Oh, I'd love to. I'm really, it's weird that there's a place I've never been to. I feel a real affinity with it. I'd like to know more about the history. Not necessarily, we don't need to spend 3 hours going through it today, but I'm just fascinated with the culture, the history, and I suspect the opportunities there, which we'll get to. Dave, so grew up as a farming boy there, and then there was a time when your family decided to get out of there, and you came to Australia.
Yeah, the Zimbabwe government started a land reform program in, I think, 1999-2000, and terribly executed, just kind of political play, and really just targeted white farmers and black Zimbabwean farmers who didn't support the government, and thousands of farmers got kicked off their land. So we were fortunate enough to, after a long wait, get visas to move to Australia. So I finished high school in Brisbane. Did 3 years of high school in Brisbane.
And can I ask whether, did you have to walk away, or was there some, what happened? Like, just like, we get a chance, we're just going to walk out of here? Or was it sort of resumed, as it were, your land?
Yeah, I mean, I'd grown up, it never crossed in my mind that I'd leave Zimbabwe. And then when the land stuff kicked off, as a young kid, you've kind of watching TV and the president is telling you that, white farmers are evil, and I guess the hatred that I think that stirred up. My dad kept trying to farm. Like we when things got hairy, we moved into town for a bit, and he'd go out to the farm. And then a couple of farmers in our area got killed, and after that, they kind of decided that it really wasn't worth trying to hang around, and started to look for other options.
Mm. And so moved to Australia. What was that culturally? I mean, how different culturally are we? What was your experience of the culture? I guess going to boarding school, a lot of boys, there's all that sort of camaraderie and so on. But some culturally, was there some barriers you had to sort of get through? Or was it just like, you beauty, I've hit, I'm in heaven?
I was super excited, and before we even got here, felt so grateful for the opportunity. But yeah, massive culture shock. I mean, at high school in Zimbabwe, they were still caning, still using the cane, and then you kind of arrive in Australia, and it's a lot more kind of casual approach to things in terms of relating to your teachers. But yeah, I kind of threw myself into sport. That was the way that was the way I made friends. Once you're on the field, you're no longer a new kid with a funny accent. You're just part of the team, and if you can play well, then people want to have you around.
That's the beauty of rugby, isn't it? Like, you can speak with a funny accent, head like a drop pie, all these sort of things. But like, as long as you can play footy, then you're okay.
Yeah. and so that really was my outlet. And yeah, kind of threw myself into sport, and I'd grown up always wanting to play rugby for the Springboks. I was a big Springbok supporter. And so when we moved to Australia, it was, want to play for the Wallabies.
You've answered my question, right? But, I guess I was interested to understand, I guess what it's like playing for another country against your home country. Was there a? I mean, how was that?
I love playing the Springboks. I would have loved to have been able to play against Zimbabwe at some point, but they're going through a bit of a tough patch. I think they'll get back up there. But yeah, always looked forward to it.
Dave, how did you balance? I guess you would have had your interest in agriculture and ecology, and wouldn't have waned. I mean, I guess it's how did you find the balance between playing rugby at international level and also sort of maintaining your contact with your passion, your other passion?
In 2008, 2009, I co-founded an organisation here in Australia, and we were partnering with a rural community in Zimbabwe, and really starting to try and work on basic kind of food and water security issues. Low input gardening was one thing, kind of trying to use water points as a place for community gardens for people to come together to learn, I guess, more climate adapted ways of growing vegetables and really kind of basic needs. And then did a bit of work there with conservation farming, where small scale farmers are kind of digging basins and planting into basins that then trap the water. And it's been really successful in rural Zimbabwe.
That's still working? That's still
still working. There's a few different conservation farming. There's a group that calls it farming God's way.
Yeah.
So that kind of gave me a bit of a link. And then towards the end of my involvement there, we were really starting to look at a value chain approach to that sort of development work. Whereas if you can actually provide a better market, farmers are smart. They'll figure out the rest. And rather than go in there and be really prescriptive, telling people you need a fence, you need to do this, you need to be looking after livestock better. If you can actually just say, well, actually, if you can get your goat or your steer looking like this, you can get 2 or 3 times more money for it. And all of a sudden, farmers are solving issues, coming together. And a big part of that is just actually providing a market where there's more than just one buyer that comes and rips them off, creating a bit of competition. I think in that sense, there's probably parallels to regenerative ag in Australia. I think as consumers realise the value of food and are starting to be more willing to spend their money kind of either going direct to farmers or spending a little bit more for food that is actually better. I think farmers aren't dumb. We're going to see a lot more farmers starting to take an interest and rethink a lot of the ways we've been doing things.
Meet the demand. It's a great point. And, one I often bang on about is, we go to school, we do economics, whatever, 101, whatever it is, and, supply demand is what we're taught. That's the balance. And that works, I guess, to some degree, and that's certainly the way that the most of the first world countries sort of operate. And I'm a great believer in exactly what you've just said, Dave, that if we can create the demand, a demand-led economy, will generate the supply. Instead of farmers or anyone in any industry really just creating something to hopefully sell to someone, that we as farmers, if we can actually be growing products in the paddock, and we know, even before they're born, essentially where they're going to go, who's going to eat that thing, who's going to buy that, then that's a much better business model than creating a whole lot of stuff and going, oh God, where am I going to sell it? So generating that interest, which you said is absolutely growing. People are keen to know where their food's from, and they're much more conscientious about where it's from, how it was raised, chemical input, nutritional value, that sort of thing. So, big fan of that, of let's generate the interest, let's generate the demand. As you say, farmers aren't dumb. They're going to go, oh, really? So if I just do this, I tweak this and tweak that. And I love what you said about, I guess the old way, if we can call it that, of prescriptive farming, fences, whatever else. But it's often those small tweaks, isn't it? That relate and are adapted to a situation, as opposed to someone going, you've got to adopt this. You've got to put your fences here. Here's a recipe. Here's a prescription. It's a bit like health too, isn't it? Prescriptive medicine, which is another conversation.
I guess that's the challenge. Is it really is about changing or challenging your paradigm and trying to think in a different way, which as humans is hard. We often shy away from change. And to your question earlier, I guess one of the things that struck me moving to Australia, and for the first time living in a big city, was how farmers kind of have in some ways a kind of revered in Australian folklore and culture as kind of these salt of the earth, pull themselves up by their bootstraps, make a plan, super resilient. But then on the other hand, we don't, as a society, from what I've seen, really look after farmers that well. There's a big disconnect there with Australia generally being so urbanised. Farmers are, from my point of view, really forgotten in many ways. And so trying to trying to think about that and see some of the big issues that farmers are facing in terms of, debt, dealing with a changing climate, mental health issues, farmer suicides, and then to throw a few other things in the mix, coal mining on ag land.
Fracking.
And I think that, for me, that's something that I think is really important that more Australians start to get vocal about, is how we can support farmers who are standing up and trying to, protect the places that they love and be able to produce food and fibre for all Australians. And so a few years ago, I went up to Maules Creek and got involved in a protest against a coal mine there, and actually locked on and got arrested with Rick Laird, who's a fifth generation farmer in the area. And I guess when you actually meet farmers and try to understand the challenges that they're up against every day, and then see, this new coal mine 4 kilometres from his kid's school, the impacts it's having on the water in the area, noise, dust, just ongoing issues. I think we've got to be better at looking after farmers, and putting more things in place where we can actually support them, and ensure that a good farmer is able to actually earn a good living.
And Dave, what's we're sort of cutting to the chase already, which is okay. What given that you brought it up, what's I guess how are you supporting, or how will you support farmers? What's your sort of what drives you to support farmers in that way? Like to literally get arrested and go home in the back of the divvy van, or down to the cop shop at least. Are you going to do that again? If anyone's got a mine nearby, David is more than willing to. He's got chains and locks and everything.
I mean, one of the things I've been thinking a lot about lately, and it's probably just where I'm at, is how are we letting this happen to places that we love, and I guess as an immigrant to Australia, trying to grapple with how do you truly start to belong to a place and to really call that home. And I think we're not going to fight for the places that we don't love, and it's very hard to love a place that you don't know. And so actually getting to know this incredible continent and learning more about it, the history, learning from tens of thousands of years of Aboriginal knowledge. And the exciting thing for me is seeing farmers like yourself who are doing that, who are on that journey of entering into a genuine relationship with their land, and learning, adapting, finding what works, becoming a true kind of expert on their farm, and not relying on the other so-called experts who will come in and prescribe something and then nick off for a month or two and then come back and check on you. I think the regenerative ag movement really provides an access point for people who eat food, which is most Australians, I think.
There's a few breatharians out there.
And the farmers who are producing it to, start to actually connect and join some of the dots and hopefully build something that's better than the current way we're doing things.
Dave, how do you And I trust this will be reflective and sort of representative of opportunities for others. You know, what are some of the ways that you connect with your? Because this is a new landscape for you, not new as in new to Burrawa. Have you been to Burrawa before?
Been through a few times.
Yeah. Have you been? We'll have to get you to come to one of the rugby games, the Burra Goldies.
Sounds good.
They'd love that. You turn up at the top pub there. What are you doing here? We've actually had some legends there before in the last years. Lots of very funny stories. Where was I going with that? But how does? I mean, this is a new land. This is a new country for you. Not so much new, but this is not where you grew up, or you weren't born here. So how have you managed to sort of adapt and connect to this landscape, to this country?
Spending time outside. Really trying to, get out and experience some of the beautiful places that are, literally on our doorsteps. I think one of the things we're up against is that a lot of us no longer live here. We're living on our phones, on Instagram and Facebook feeds. Water comes from a tap. Food comes from the grocery store. We've lost all those connections to what's actually important and bringing those things. I'd say spending time in nature, reading more about the history of Australia. I think someone like Charlie Massey in Call of the Reed Warbler does such an amazing job in weaving together so much of the history and the hurt and injustice that's there, and trying to get people to think about, well, what do we do with it? How do we actually start to move forward? I'll be honest, like for the first quite a while of living in Australia, the birds are incredible. Love the birds here, but found the lack of mammals coming from Zimbabwe strange, and I don't know, the forest just felt a bit empty. And then went down to Tassie, and spent a bit of time in the Tarkine in the northwest a few years ago now, and like hearing Tassie devils, seeing quolls, I don't know, it just sparked something in me about what this landscape must have been like, and what it could be like once again. Obviously, cats and foxes, invasive species, are trashing the place at the moment. So, that's a big, I guess that's a big issue that as a country we're going to have to start to put a lot more resources into. If we want to see, species like bilbies and numbats and all these other things that are kind of on the brink of extinction, get more of a foothold.
I want to link back to, I want to get back to books, because you've got one. You and Emma have got one I don't talk about. But while we're on cats and foxes and so on, whenever that comes up in conversation and their, I guess their impact on wildlife, and it sits very squarely beside the conversation around eating meat, I feel. And there's a wonderful book on eating meat by Matt Evans, who in that a very, and I have to say, very good read, very balanced discussion around, the pros and cons of eating meat and environmental impact and ethics and so on. And in that he says, and I've been quoting him ever since because I think it's just gold. He says, there's a lot of debate, a lot of argument, a lot of conflict around, people's reasons for not eating meat, and then their environmental or their ethical or their nutritional as well. And, particular groups of activists release chickens from their enclosures in, I think it happened at Taranaki Farm there in Victoria a couple of years ago because they want the chickens to go free. Of course, I think that was a good idea. And then they just got maimed by foxes. Or, similar things, sheep stolen from places then tucked into apartments and, just sort of really interesting ways to approach it. And Matt said is in there that most significant impact that we can make is if it's about suffering, if this whole argument is about animal suffering and how can we best reduce the number of animals and the degree of suffering, removal of feral cats, number one. Hundreds of thousands or millions of, native species in Australia alone, forget the rest of the world, are being tortured and killed every night. If we can get those people who are really keen to see the end of, domestic cow farming in Australia, actually get them focusing on something that's going to be effective, like getting rid of cats, feral cats. It's a tough one because I guess maybe a lot of them have cats at home and they're fluffy and they're on calendars.
It's a really tough issue, and for me comes back to something that Charlie Massey talks about in his book is around ecological literacy, and for me part of that is trying to take more of a holistic view on things. And I mean a good example, which is incredibly controversial at the moment, is the feral horses in Kosciuszko. And you can take the view, as many people do, that horses are incredibly intelligent, beautiful, an important part of cultural heritage, albeit 5 or 6 generations compared to 600 generations for Indigenous Australians in that area. Or you can take the view that they're not native to that area and they're doing horrendous damage. I was in the Snowies about a month ago, and just seeing the amount of damage that they were doing to, particularly around streams and boggy areas. Yeah, it's a tough thing. Making those decisions. Does the health of the ecosystem come ahead of 20,000 horses, or should we allow 20,000 horses to destroy an ecosystem for countless other species? It's isn't it? It's the balance sheet of suffering, isn't it? And just take that one step further. If we were to leave horses there and they weren't to be controlled, whether in this case horses, then at some point, as you say, that ecology is degraded to a point where other species are impacted, or already are, and then those horses are impacted anyway. I guess what's better, a horse to be destroyed humanely. Let's hope it's always humanely, as often as possible, or it's a very quick operation, and or to starve, or to would die of thirst, and I think the pictures of that and the outcome of that is not clear enough, is it? And so how can those who don't appreciate, not that everyone doesn't appreciate, but those who aren't sort of on country and in a landscape, how can they be more landscape literate, do you think? What is that possible? To then appreciate these sort of issues? I mean, I think there's opportunities for everyone, whether it's getting stuck into gardening in your backyard or at your local community garden. I think getting your hands dirty and starting to learn more about nature and the complexity of it, and just how challenging it is to actually grow a few tomatoes and dealing with pests and
Frost.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great start.
How about backyard literacy? That might be a good place to start.
Yeah.
That's a landscape of sorts, isn't it? It's only small, but
yeah. And I think with COVID, one of the things that certainly from the people I'm talking to, there is a much greater appreciation for what we would call the natural world. So, people noticing trees and birds and all sorts of things that we kind of have just taken for granted, and just seeing the wonder of nature, and just, I don't know how incredible life is, and what a role as humans we can and we should be playing our part rather than trying to sit above it. And I think that mindset has really it's kind of brought us to the edge of catastrophe at the moment. If you're willing to listen to scientists.
Is Zach Bush talks about the sixth. Are we at the beginning of our sixth extinction? Is that right?
Mm.
That's what he talks about. It's pretty scary, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think we're on the way.
Are you looking for more information to assist you on your regenerative journey? We've created an online community of supporters with exclusive access to interview transcripts, live online Q&A sessions with Charlie and his interviewees, as well as the opportunity to be interviewed on the show yourself. If you would like to be part of this community, or would simply like to contribute to the development of the podcast series, please make your way to patreon.com/The Regenerative Journey podcast. We look forward to you becoming a member of the Regenerative Journey community. Let's get back to this week's episode.
I want to just jump to your have lessons learned, I guess. Where in sport have you, or your experience with sport at that level, have there been some experiences you've had or learnings you've had that have helped shape your approach to your advocacy of regenerative farming? Is there sort of any whether it's leadership or it's teamwork, or is there anything that sort of that if you'd been farming, we can't change that you grew up on a farm. If you hadn't done your sport, you may not have learnt some lessons. I guess your sense of agriculture and ecology may have stayed the same, but as having gone through that phase of high level sport, has that taught you anything about your approach to regen ag?
I think at the end of the day, it's all about people and trying to reduce the barriers for people engaging in the conversation and being able to, see themselves as someone who can risk the discomfort or whatever it might be in actually starting to learn something different. My grandfather, he passed away a few years ago, but he died kind of as a conservative farmer, climate denier, and there was, I guess looking back, there was really nothing that invited him into a different conversation. I think as humans, we kind of just get caught in our little silos in our echo chambers and look for information that reinforces our worldviews. So I think for anything, when you're part of a team or working in ag, it's really trying to meet people where they are, not judging what people are doing, and having knowing that if things were a little bit different in your upbringing, you'd probably be doing the same thing. Really trying to think about how we engage people, how we build more of a conversation, reduce some of the barriers to more people being interested in and getting involved, and not making it into this kind of holier than thou club of people who think that they have the answers.
I think it's a great point that, and you're here, have been here for today, yesterday and today. I'm losing track of time. Today's day 2 of our Introduction to Biodynamics course, and we emphasise that a lot, Hamish and I, that we're not saying you should do this and what you have done is wrong. It's about getting back to that very prescriptive approach to farming, in which we advocate that biodynamics is. It's there are different techniques and there's practices and there's a whole lot of philosophy and principles around it. But if you can just pick up the pieces that you really enjoy and do, then it's a sort of a step-by-step, go softly approach, which I think is, we like to think that works, that people don't need to get bashed over the head. And we certainly don't say that what other people are doing is wrong. We emphasise the difference. I think that's one of the barriers too, is that for people stepping into the, change, that fear of change is that, does this mean that what I did was wrong, or probably more poignantly, what Dad did was wrong? What would Dad think about that? And my experience was well, I've got to say, it was wonderful. My father was, he was very embracing of the changes we made, and we went sort of cold turkey on a few things. I didn't tell him everything we're doing. Yeah. But I think that approach works.
Yeah. I mean, when you're so invested in a certain way of doing things or belief, you go out and spend a lot of money on an expensive car. It's very hard to then admit that it's a lemon. you want to keep trying to tell everyone that no, it's actually good.
No, it hasn't lost value. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think the more you attack people and tell them what they're doing is wrong, it's human nature to sort of retreat and become more entrenched in that way of doing things. I think what Charlie Massey and others and yourself with this podcast are doing is trying to invite people into more of a conversation about it. And having briefly touched on biodynamics at uni, I've enjoyed learning a bit more about it and meeting farmers who are doing it or thinking about getting into it.
Dave, let's jump back to books. Your book, your and Emma's book, In Our Nature. Tell me why you wrote, put together. And you're a keen photographer.
Yeah, I enjoy photography.
Can we tell people that? Is that a secret?
No, go for it. I took a year off from Australian rugby in 2017 and spent most of it on a farm in the south of Zimbabwe. I've been working on a project in that area for the last few years, trying to bring together some agriculture, conservation, and community development work. And the 7 months there was a real kick in the guts. I guess a really good reality check, and a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. And
what was hard about that?
The kind of backdrop was the economy was sort of grinding to a halt, politically unstable, and then just things on the farm, everything was breaking. There were no easy days, which I guess is farming. But at the end, kind of coming back here, decided to try and write down some thoughts and think about the things I learned. And some people were interested in hearing more, so decided to do some writing and really try and tell some more hopeful stories. I guess one of the things that it did allow us to do was meet and spend time with a bunch of people who I think are doing amazing things. I've kind of dedicated their lives to building new models and different ways of doing things. So tried to tell some of those stories, put a bunch of photographs in there. I know a lot of people prefer photos to words, so myself included at times. So really trying to, I guess the hope for it was that it would reach a an audience that isn't particularly that interested in conservation or agriculture, and try and tell some of those stories and get a bit of a conversation going.
It's like a carrot. You're just dangling a carrot. Is that sort of
with people who are more rugby focused. So it was and turned it into a much bigger undertaking than we'd anticipated. But we were really happy with it.
Where can people get that book? Your beautiful book.
It's available on my website, davidpocock.com, and we're posting them out as the orders come in.
I've seen photos of you and Emma with piles and piles of books, signing away, pumping them out there. It's fantastic.
Yeah, we've got I think 300 copies left, and then that's them done. So
not forever.
I think so. I think we're definitely not going to print anymore.
You heard it first here. By the time this goes out, there might only be 3 copies left.
I don't know.
Has your signature sort of changed? Did it become like more of a scribble than a well-rounded David Pocock signature?
Yeah, it doesn't take too many signing sessions as a rugby player to come up with a much more efficient signature than when you leave school.
I signed a rugby ball once back in. I'll tell a quick story. Back in Matty Corkill helped me here. We played a game. It was 2005 or 6, and we played. I'm going to forget we were playing it. We were a sort of collection of ex-Wallabies and estate reps and a few farmers. There's like a handful of farmers, and I'm going to get slaughtered. I forgot the name of our team. Anyway, so we were playing. It was a charity game. That's right. We were playing at Bungendore, the Mudchooks at Bungendore, and it was surreal. Matthew and I were walking up the street of Bungendore one morning. The morning of the game, that's right, and people were going, and they could tell that we were sort of out of town and maybe part of this team that had turned up, thinking we were like Wallabies and looking. And I turned to Matty and I said, "Mate, for the rest of our lives, this will be our most famous day." No. And at the end of the game, we signed footballs because they thought we were like, most of them didn't know. Well, they didn't know us at all. And I remember the greatest moment for me was subbing for David Wilson.
Yeah, right. That's cool.
He ran off, high five, on I went. It was like, did that just happen? Tim Gavin, Tim Horan. It was a classic. Dick Harry. So I've only signed one football, David. Where was I going with that? Oh, now tell me why that year or those 7 months on the farm. Why what made you think I'm just going to go and do that?
Like, I guess I wanted to get my hands dirty, and I'd been involved with community development work in Zimbabwe. I'd been studying ag at uni, albeit very slowly, while playing, and just wanted some time off and I guess the freedom to really throw myself into something for a period of time. And it was incredibly valuable learning experience, and I guess this has shaped some of the ways I think about trying to engage people, and has really informed the project that we're trying to get going in that part of Zimbabwe.
The one, yes. Let's talk about study, your current study, because that's and how that's sort of shaping up. Because you're where's that headed, and how long have you got to go, and what are you actually studying, and why? Probably more importantly,
I'm doing a Masters of Sustainable Ag through Charles Sturt, and after this semester, I've got a couple of subjects to go, so hopefully finish mid next year. Yeah, have really enjoyed it. I think it's a good grounding in a lot of kind of ag study with some alternative production systems thrown in there, some human ecology stuff, which I really enjoy, and have kind of been doing one subject a semester, which is far too slow.
Is that still
to finish something? But I've recently just gone back full time. Well, not back full time. Gone full time for the first time, which I've really enjoyed. Like it's certainly a different. It's a change in pace.
And how reflective of your doing your study? You're also active in the regenerative space in terms of your advocacy and your understanding. How are there parallels? Are you seeing some good parallels between what you're studying and what you're seeing in your activities? Is one keeping up with the other? Where does it sort of all sit?
Yeah, I think through the study have met a lot of farmers who have transitioned their farms to a more regenerative approach or starting to ask questions. And, I think this last drought, obviously incredibly tough time for a lot of farmers. I think there are a few that are questioning just how sustainable in the long term our kind of high input, high output approach is. Have met some amazing farmers like Vince Heffernan in Dalton.
And through the course? Or?
So he did the course that I started back in 2013, the Ecological Agriculture undergrad at Charles Sturt. He'd done that. So I guess there's a lot of alignment. One of the things I'm interested in is getting the conversation going with people living in cities. What can they do? And that's always the question. When people learn more and are interested, well, what can I do? And if Australians just started to spend $10 or $20 a week supporting regenerative agriculture, that's going to start to make a really big difference over time.
What would that $20? What would that look like? Buying particular food?
Yeah, so supporting a farmers market or a bunch of farmers trying to direct market online. People are generally doing it tough, and really watching their spending. So it may be unfeasible for some families to be doing all their shopping at the farmers market, but I think a little bit over time is actually going to start to make a difference.
And I'd suggest it's also, we'll get onto nutrition. It's what they're buying at a farmer's market from a regenerative farmer, or understanding where it's from. It's also what's in their shopping trolley at the supermarket, or where they're shopping that isn't a farmer's market, isn't it? It's like, well, let's get the organic or the regeneratively grown whatever, but let's look at what else is in the shopping trolley.
Well, I mean, this is a much bigger conversation around
it's a whole podcast.
The true cost of food.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, Michael Pollan talks about how there is no cheap food. It's a total illusion. Someone's paying the cost, and whether that's through
or something.
Yeah.
Something's paying the cost.
Yeah, whether that's environmental degradation, public health costs. It's being paid somewhere, maybe not by the person who buys it doesn't think they're paying the cost. But I guess my hope is that we can move towards a system where farmers are realising a lot more at the farm gate for the produce that they're producing, and there's less being skimmed by processors and supermarkets.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity. Just a few minutes ago, Dave, saying, what we have is city people living in the city, hopefully buying some better food directly if they can, and as you've identified, and there's much more science around it with Zach Bush and sort of Breathe Your Biome, and understanding the significant health benefits of just being in nature. Forget sort of eating that food or something, just literally the breath that we take and what we get from the environment and what the exchanges that take place and the epigenetics and all that sort of stuff. That's something that is clearly getting more clearly understood. And so if we can understand that, and the city people can understand the benefit of that, well, there's a whole lot of farmland out here. Some is probably not as clean as others, but there's a whole lot of farmland out here that they can access. At the same time, there are farmers with that farmland who have food that can be produced and have acres and acres of beautiful land that people can experience. So it's actually, I think it's really cool. And if, I'd love to get that connection even tighter, that there's benefits for both. There's the experiencing of nature. And if those people come on farm, then they're actually going to be contributing to those rural communities. If they're not buying direct from that farmer, they might be walking around his hills and helping create the story of that farmer, and which then may lead him to producing his own food. But at least they're driving through town, they're supporting those communities. But it's sort of like a, dare I say, no-brainer, isn't it? There's not much downside to any of that.
Well, yeah, and I think one of the things to add to that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about is just the mental health benefits that are being studied, and there's some pretty compelling stuff looking at this last big dry spell, and farmers who were more involved in land care groups and farming regeneratively generally got through in a far better mental health kind of way than farmers who were probably a lot more isolated and really up against it. So I think that in itself is a really powerful thing to be working for, is trying to connect more farmers with people who are eating their food. Yeah, that alone could be powerful for rural Australians. And hopefully, with COVID, more Australians will be travelling, in Australia and actually seeing what country Australia has to offer.
One of the benefits of COVID.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think just on that, one of the sense of well-being and sort of getting through the drought, I think got a bit to do with, regenerative farmers and their practices being, they make their decisions, and their intuition is one of the ways they help make those decisions. And I know as a conventional farmer, I was looking for answers from other people. I was looking for that recipe or that prescription. And then when that answer wasn't there, I wasn't happy with it, or the results weren't as I was told they'd be. There's a real sense of lack of control, and the impact can be significant in many ways. But as a farmer who's much more in touch with nature, you're much more, and there's a much more sense of being in control of the things and focusing on what is in your control and letting go of the things you're not in control of. And so, there's just being more adaptable and being autonomous as a farmer. You're not being reliant on so many people, and that sense, it literally does give you a sense of well-being, because you're focusing on what you're in control of. Things you're not in control of, you just not dismiss, but you just say, well, look, I'm not going to get all worked up about that. And that it's a bit of a sleeping giant there, that the benefit of regenerative ag. People talk about food, they talk about the environment, those benefits, and there's social benefits, but the individual farmer benefit and their family, it's literally saving lives.
I think that touches on, for people who aren't farmers, just being human. I guess you grow up and you're constantly kind of deferring authority to your parents, to school, to institutions. And then at some point in life, you decide, I'll need to, take some personal responsibility and become the expert on my own life, because at the end of the day, I'm the only constant character in this drama. And there's something really, really powerful in doing that.
Writing your own script.
Yeah.
Talking about scripts, I just want to touch on any other books that you recommend, love, would suggest that people try and track down any that's really inspired you?
I think in an Australian context, Dark Emu by Bruce Pascoe and Charlie Massey's book, Call of the Reed Waller. Two very powerful accounts, and there's a lot in there. I think very relevant to any Australian.
Totally, farming or otherwise.
Trying to think of other stuff. A Sand County Almanac, Aldo Leopold. That's worth a read. I reread Silent Spring the other day, Rachel Carson, and I think just it's timeless, just so relevant to the times we find ourselves in now. Actually, in the back of In Our Nature, there's a reading list, so it could be worth getting just for the reading list. It's pretty extensive, and
don't find a mate and go to the back page and photocopy it. Go and get the book yourself, stinge bags. Remember, there's only 300 left. And Dave, what about mentors? Did you have mentors, whether that be sort of in a sporting sense or a life sense, or anyone that sort of you have you're thankful that was in your life?
Yeah, incredibly grateful for the role my dad's played as a kid, getting to spend a lot of time with him on the farm, and then he loves birds. Like he grew up big into falconry and was always just encouraging us to spend time in nature and kind of be a bit weird with our obsession with birds and names and trapping birds and whatever else we were doing. So he's been a huge, I guess, figure and mentor for me. My mum's dad, my grandfather, also probably in a very different way, was someone I really admired and looked up to. And then I guess you look back and there's always a teacher or someone who saw something in you or encouraged you to explore a part of yourself that you otherwise didn't have permission to. So grateful for those sorts of characters. But I guess moving to Australia and not having any other family here, a lot of it has been through reading, and there's a lot of good stuff out there by people with a lot of life experience, and that I think that's been a big part of trying to learn more and work out what it means to engage and get involved in things that you're passionate about, and hopefully live a better life. I've got an older friend in Perth who I catch up with once every 2 or 3 weeks, and he's always good for a bit of wisdom or he's not afraid to tell you how he sees it.
Good sounding board.
Yeah,
no, it's important, isn't it? Having that. I mean, there's the mirror we hold up against ourselves, but often we got to start by someone else has got to hold that mirror up, don't they? And just call you out. And I can't tell you how many, through interviews, that has been a theme. I don't know whether you've always talked about it on the interview. It might have been pre or post, so I may not necessarily have captured it, but there's certainly, I mean, for me, mentoring is something I do for others, and but more importantly, it's what I guess my appreciation of what it is to be mentored, and learn from others' mistakes. It's really I can't suggest strongly enough that anyone, you don't have to be a farmer listening to this either, to sort of the benefits of mentoring and a confidant, whether it's your partner or someone. And that's, it's good for mental health. It's good for just growth and development. It's good for your children. That's a real motivator for me, is certainly, having others that are far more important than me in this world, and and the legacy I leave them. Talking about legacies, Dave, Alan Savory, we know him, farmers know him, and I guess the world is getting to know Alan through TED Talks. He's becoming more widely known for his work over there. You mentioned, tell us a bit more about him from the perspective of one of his countrymen. What that we may not know. I'm not suggesting you dig up dirt on him. I'm just saying, what's as someone you've met and as someone you're aware of, what else can you tell us about him that's we may not know, his history or his personality?
I guess his history in Zimbabwe, he was a politician for a time, and incredibly kind of principled and outspoken in his against the Rhodesian government, and eventually, I think, just kind of went into self-imposed exile because he just didn't feel like he could actually do anything there.
How long ago are we talking? Sort of give us a sense of
late 70s.
Yeah.
And I guess like maybe less appreciated where you're actually from, and so I think it probably took him moving away and working with people in other countries to really get holistic management and holistic planned grazing to a wider audience. And now you're seeing in Zimbabwe a real embracing of holistic planned grazing on privately owned farms and in communally owned lands, really trying to address some of the land degradation and huge issues that farmers are facing there, particularly as rainfall gets less reliable, and they're seeing a lot more drought, and then that's turning into floods because the land has kind of lost its capacity to hold water when it does rain.
Sponge. Dave, do you think you're more appreciated because you're more appreciated here because you're here, as opposed to if you'd stayed there?
I've got no idea.
Well, not so much appreciated, it's probably the wrong word, but I guess, very different trajectories, I guess, Do you think you would have, would you have, I guess if you'd stayed there, I don't know. I guess you didn't stay there.
Mm. Yeah, it's one of those things. You
might have played for the Springboks.
You never know, and it's a strange thing to kind of grapple with, where you go back there and you don't necessarily feel like you're fully Zimbabwean anymore and fully welcome. I'm very aware in Australia, if you're kind of welcome, but if you question some of the unquestionable things, you very quickly get told to chuff off back to where you come from.
You're sort of in a not a no man's land, but I think I can understand that would always be an Aussie's fallback. It's like, oh, you don't understand. You're not from here.
Yeah,
you don't get it.
Yeah.
Well, mate, we're all very glad you did come over here.
No, thank you.
For lots of reasons.
I really love this place, and yeah.
What about legacy? Tell me about legacy. What do you want to leave your family, this world?
The big questions.
I started saving them up.
One of the things I think about is, who are we apart from the places where we live? As humans, we've evolved in landscapes, and through our technology now have like unimagined power to shape them. Mm. We're at an incredible place in history where we now have an understanding of just how awry things have gone, and at the same time have ways of changing and ways of actually being part of there's an author, Joanna Macy, and she talks about the great turning of this realization that, hang on, this way of doing things has brought, a whole heap of what we might think are benefits. But we're standing at a cliff edge, and we can actually change path. And I think doing that provides us with so much of what we're searching for as humans, for connection, true connection with each other and with the places that we live. So yeah, to me, it's incredibly exciting, despite knowing how bad things are at the moment.
You're optimistic?
I think Zimbabweans, are just ingrained optimism.
You're very resourceful.
If you're not optimistic, you've got no chance. I mean, I am. Having said that, it's hard to see so myou of the things that you love, I guess, disappearing, and knowing that if you kind of look at things with an approach of viewing them as complex systems and kind of some of the work around resilience theory, it's often not the case that you can just go back to how things were. And there are thresholds that you can cross, and the best you may be able to do is to look for an opportunistic time to transform or help that system transform into something that's more desirable. But it's potentially never going to be, like what you read about in some of the journals from a few hundred years ago, and just what a paradise some of this landscape was.
And it's a great point that Peter Andrews made many years ago, and he keeps on making, that this landscape is being wounded over many years, and we need to put it in intensive care, and we need to use any tool we have at our disposal, whether that's sort of a physical tool, implement, technology, whatever, to heal. And he copped a lot of flack by encouraging the use of willows in waterways. It's a suture on a wound. We just got to use it whatever we can. This thing's dying. You don't have time to pick and choose, and we don't have time either. And that's I'm a big fan of exotic species in the landscape. We're looking at a willow. It's sort of aesthetically pleasing on a dam, but there's plenty of other willows around and plenty of other oaks and things that we use to heal. So I totally agree that trying to get back to where we were, that state is nearly impossible. It's not to say we can't, but I don't think we need to, because it's not what this landscape requires. It needs again to be put into intensive care. And I'm not sure you actually answered the question, Dave. The legacy. Is there a particular legacy? Is there a project you're working on at the moment that you particularly proud of? Well, not even necessarily a project, but just a focus, a passion that some years down the track you'll look back on and think, what, that was really worth my time.
I'm busy working on a project in southern Zimbabwe, really trying to build a new model around how agriculture, conservation, and community development can meet really at that intersection. I guess having been involved in community development work where you're working with incredibly poor communities and seeing like genuine improvements in life, access to healthcare, education, a whole bunch of human improvements, but not necessarily seeing the land base improving, not seeing less degradation, not seeing less erosion around streams and rivers, less siltation of dams, all those sorts of things. I think the challenge for us as humans is to create models where we can meet our human needs and thrive as a species, and those models ensure that non-humans and the ecosystems that we depend on are thriving. And I think it is possible. It's not going to look like what we're doing at the moment, and that's the exciting thing to me.
It's called harmony, I think.
Yeah. I think it's a different way of thinking about things, of viewing the world, of viewing our place in the world, and it's going to have some serious trade-offs, and I don't think it's going to. Not everyone can be a winner in that sort of world, and it's going to have to be a lot more collaborative, and probably a lot less about competition. Yeah, to me, that's exciting. That's what we need. I think that's at the end of the day, that's what we long for as a species, and I think the tragedy of it all is that we have been searching for something, and in the process kind of destroying the very thing that holds the answers for us, which is the places we live, the people we love. And there's really something about being on land that is functioning and healing, and there's something incredibly grounding and sort of spiritual about that, I think.
Dave, I think that's as good a place to stop as anywhere. We've probably got day 2 of biodynamics to learn more about that sort of thing.
Yeah, get into it.
Maybe I should have interviewed you this afternoon. You might have had a whole different...
Yeah, maybe.
whole different spin. Dave, as I said, with sincerity, really glad that your life has taken the path that it has, that you're one of us, as it were, in Australia, and at the same time still contributing significantly to in Zimbabwe, and making a difference there, because I know that's your love, and to be able to contribute in both places is a wonderful thing. And talking about contribution, if you'd ever like to contribute to our workforce here at Hanamino, you're most welcome. We do. I know Vince. I'm going to steal Vince. Is it okay if Dave comes and landmarks for us one day? Actually,
sounds good.
Vince, I have to give him a rap. Invincible. He was the one who he sent me a text. Oh, it must have been last year sometime, and he said, I've got a mate. I think you should meet and be nice to him. Something like that.
It's very Vince. We're actually there next Saturday. I think he's putting in a few more thousand trees.
Yeah, nice. No, he's in Moorlands Biodynamic Lamb. He's I think he's at the at the markets every week or every second week there in I was going to say Epic.
It's definitely not every week, but he is kind of active on social media and lets people know. And yeah, I think you can order through his website and just pick up.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff. Good Texel lamb there. Dave, thank you so much. So enjoyed that. I think it's a sort of a appropriate spot looking back out over the dam and that beautiful landscape that I'm certainly in love with. And I'm really thrilled that you've spent a couple of days with us learning biodynamics and having the opportunity to have a chat.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks for having me.
Good fun.
Yeah, cheers.
Well, there you go, David Pocock. Love David as a rugby player and as an environmental activist, because that's what he is, sitting there after our biodynamic workshop. But moving on to other things. Next week is Cindy O'Meara. She is a legend. She's a nutritionist. I wouldn't call her a dietitian. She's an activist of some sorts, and Changing Habits is her website. She is fantastic. Caught up with her at a beautiful little farm at Maloney in Queensland, and hope you enjoy my little chat with Cindy as much as I did. I look forward to seeing you next week on The Regenerative Journey.
This podcast is produced by Rhys Jones at Jaeger Media. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe, share, rate and review. For more episode information, please head over to www.charliearnott.com.au.